It has been an absolute pleasure this week to be listening to Andrew Marr as he's been heavily covering the Conservative Party conference this week. And if you listen to his broadcast, I think the last one, of course, will be today, sort of wrapping up the Conservative Party conference. Well worth listening to. Indeed, today is, well, Truss's big moment. This is her big speech, and she has to try and restamp her authority. But there are already significant problems because everything Truss wants to do, or at least try and do, because, as we said before, the current government is now run by these Brexit ultras, even more so than Boris Johnson's government. And they are determined to run a mile a minute to try and achieve their greatest goal of all, which is to turn the UK into this Singapore-on-Thames model. And the thing is, we've seen that in the mini budget. And we know they want to go even further. And luckily, we are seeing a lot of Tories going, we don't have a mandate for this. This is what we said in 2019. And some are even going, at Brexit, this isn't what we wanted to do either. Because as we've always said, this whole push by these Brexit ultras, the people who were most wanted Brexit, were these right-wing libertarians who wanted to just leave Europe, deregulate everything, and just turn us into this low tax, low regulation, sort of very much in the vein of sort of the United States, just let the markets run wild and free. It's not what a lot of people in the party want, because as we've always said, there was a big split even prior to Brexit, and Brexit very much enforced this, that there was a split between those Tories who wanted regulation versus those who wanted to completely get rid of regulation completely. And we are seeing this now play out. And we will see these divisions play out in the coming weeks and months as we return to Parliament and Liz Truss tries to get her right-wing, libertarian, radical, economic agenda through Parliament. Her own MPs aren't having it. but before all this comes sort of crashing into us, I thought we'd go over this because I think this is sort of a bit of fun. Because there have been a lot of very, very angry Tories at a conference. And this is not normally what you see at a conference. This doesn't happen. This was meant to be a big lap of victory for Liz Truss. It ain't turned out that way. So, before we go diving into this top 10 list, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. So, over we go to The Guardian with their title of The 10 Angriest Tories at the Conservative Conference. So, who is the top 10 of this? Well, first of all, it has to go to the anonymous MPs and party sources, because we have had a lot of anonymous MPs and sources willing to say off the record what they think about Liz Truss and her agenda. So they start off saying, plenty of fear and loathing from the unnamed insiders, of course. I would rather see Keir Starmer in number 10 than this Conservative Party. Wow. One MP says in this excellent read from Aubrey Algett and Pippa Crea and Jessica Elgott. This is the kind of chaos that you only see at the end of a premiership. It's impossible for her to recover, says a former cabinet minister. The trouble is there are too many bastards in the party, a minister told the Daily Mail. Michael Gove is an absolute snake, a party insider told the Telegraph. All good stuff, but sorry, folks, on the day of such riches, you'll need to put your name on it if you want to get higher than 10th. And that's just a small smattering of the stuff, because, oh boy, has there been a lot of stuff. But now we get into some named Tories. So the first one on this list, Michael Gove, and he's been a very, very angry boy this week. The aforementioned absolute snake would be higher, but his most vicious and consequential intervention was that which helped to do the 45 pence tax cut policy in an interview on Sunday. On Tuesday, he confirmed to himself the point of observation that the party should reflect on the ideas which Boris Johnson won on the 2019 won in 2019 on. And in more normal times, such a clear repudiation of the party's direction of travel from a former senior minister would be news in itself. They're right there, absolutely right. Robert Buckland, again, former really big Minister of Justice, got booted out and replaced with, well, Suella Braverman. And there's a lot of people wondering at the time, why on earth did he get booted from his job? So, when asked what he thought of the interventions by Gove and the former Chief Whip Julian Smith, who, among others, other interventionists in the last few weeks, at one point summarised his position as the Welsh Secretary said, I think it would be better for many of my colleagues to keep their own counsel. Robert Buckland says, shut up, says interviewer John Supple. Yeah, he replied. Kemi Badnoch. Surprising that she's on this list, but she's not the only, shall we say, former leadership contender to be on this list. The first serving cabinet minister on our list had a very few choice words for another one. That was Suella Braverman, who accused Gove and others of staging a coup over the top rate income tax. After first joining with Braverman in having to have a go at the backbenchers, trying to lob grenades at the PM, she then turned to the Home Secretary, saying, I don't think we should be talking about coups, she said. I think that sort of language is just too inflammatory. But oh boy, is that happening, because at number 6 is Penny Mordaunt, because there's been a lot of talk quite recently about Penny and Sunak joining hands and essentially taking the premiership, with Penny Mordaunt potentially becoming the PM and Sunak sort of slipping back into the role of Chancellor. That could very well likely happen, because a lot of Tories do not want another long leadership race. So on to number 6, Penny Mordaunt, the former leadership candidate and another cabinet minister who, let's remember, are supposed to be bound by a collective responsibility, carefully rubbished the idea of cutting benefits, saying it makes sense that they should raise in line with inflation, not pay, she said. We're about trying to help people on one hand and then take it away with another. Truss was also furious with Mordaunt, the leader of the Commons, but her interviews reveals the risk inherent in Truss's insistence that no decision has yet been taken on this issue. Until one is, ministers can attack the idea without specifically contradicting the government, which is very true. Number 5, Simon Clarke. Clarke's intervention was relatively modest, but it came from a single tweet saying that Suella Braverman speaks a lot of sense, which would be perfectly normal thing to say about a fellow cabinet minister, except that the quotes from Braverman were the one about the coup and the other about a disappointment at the 45 pence tax U-turn. So there's another cabinet minister, one to be sure of Truss's most intense loyalists, suggesting that the government has got it wrong and accusing backbenchers of insurrection. 4, Frost. I mean, he's on here, of course. So, Frost, a Truss loyalist. Lord Frost told LBC that the government is, quote, doing it the right thing, trying to set a new direction. But he also said that the government had made the unnecessary political errors and looked rather weak. He made the avoidable mistakes and had gone about the whole thing in an amateurish, blundering way. The only loyalist to say things like that about me is my mother, and that at least not giving radio interviews about it. So even Frost was sort of not saying, coming out against her, but saying, yeah, she's sort of done things wrong. Yeah, it's not a good look. Not a good look at all. And then, of course, Grant Shapps. So now we're on to the real big guns. Told about Buckland's demand that people like him shut up. The remarkable interview news with News Agents podcast on Tuesday, He had his very subtle go at Buckland from switching to Sunak to Truss in the leadership contest, suggesting that he applies the same to himself and was simply said, speaking truth to power. He also implied that Truss had brought his attacks on herself by sacking me and said that she had 10 days to save her premiership. Quite often, he ended in an oblivious tax on Truss by saying he was, quote, just cheering her on. What? So yeah, that is, I think, the biggest key thing, that there is so much stuff going on. Because you've got Grant Shapps, who was, I think, very, very disappointed to lose his cabinet position. And now he's just like, yeah, you know what? If she's going down, I'm just going to egg her on. I'm just going to cheer her on as this sort of, flaming Zeppelin comes crashing down. I'm just going to go, yeah, woo! That's essentially what Grant Shapps is doing. Can't blame him. And I think there are going to be a lot of other Tory backbench MPs doing the same thing as well. So number 2, Nadine Dorries. And oh my word, has Nadine Dorries been truly unleashed? Talk about an attack dog. She's gone hard in on Truss. Hard. Why? Because everything Nadine Dorries was doing as culture secretary has essentially been put on hold. Even calling out Truss, as we'll get into it later, that she does not have a mandate for anything that she is doing, and that she should go have a general election if she wants that mandate. So here you have now a backbencher basically saying, yeah, I don't have to sign up to any of your policies. I don't have to vote for anything because you don't have a mandate. This is not what you said we would be doing in this parliament. You have gone against our manifesto. So this is so even when at one point, like I say, when I first saw this, I was like, oh my God, mad Nadine Dorries, Dottie Dorries is out saying something shockingly right. But anyway, let's get what they had to say about her. At one point on Tuesday, Nadine Dorries drew on her gifts as a writer to say dreamily that the Tories' poll deficit under Boris Johnson would have burned away like a morning mist on a summer's lawn. Still very, very much a Johnson loyalist. And the rest of it was a little blunter. She then sent, 2 tweets confirming that her view on Monday that if Truss wants to turn away from Johnson's programme for government, she needs a fresh mandate, which clearly refers to another election. Shapps, incidentally, also said that these sorts of bold demands were all very well for someone like Dorries, who had a substantial second income from her novels, but less attractive to the average backbencher. All this would be remarkable under any circumstances, but all the more so from someone who said less than a month ago that she should just, quote, always show Truss the same loyalty and support I have to Boris Johnson. So that was a month ago. You can just see the pure chaos that is going to happen. And oh boy, is it going to be pure chaos. But of course, number 1, Cyril Braverman. And trust me, she's been putting out some absolute clangers this week as well. She has had an awful conference with some of her bizarre things that she has said. Like, she dreams of the front page of a photo of like the flight taking off to Rwanda. And you're like, what? So what they had to say. So at one point on Tuesday, there were 3 separate stories about the Home Secretary on the Mail Online homepage. And there's a massive picture of her on the today's Telegraph, approvingly describing her as a, quote, true blue, in part because of the series of very furious views she espoused in her interview with the Telegraph on Tuesday. From claiming that Britain has a, quote, benefit street culture, to saying that the Telegraph splash of a fighting, talking to asylum seekers was, quote, my dream and my obsession. But the most urgent part of her comments was the extraordinary reference to a backbench coup against the Prime Minister and warning that MPs like Michael Gove should stop airing their dirty linen in public. Liz Truss will very be likely hoping the same thing. So let's see how all this goes. And oh my, what a week. what a time we've got coming, ladies and gents. What a time, because you do not have these types of comments at a conference unless something is going very, very, very badly wrong. And even they know it. Even their own party knows it, just how bad they are failing. So there is going to be, as we've been saying for quite a while, there is going to be a full backbench rebellion in play. And this can only end one of two ways. Either A, it'll end up going to a general election. One of the things that has been sort of talked about is that Truss can't vote her agenda through. It gets to be sort of a lame duck. And eventually the king has to step in and say, okay, Liz, enough is enough. Time to go for a general election. That's where we might be headed. The other, of course, more slightly better direction is that essentially Penny Mordaunt and Liz and Sunak join hands, as we said earlier, and basically say, look, we're going to take charge now. And that's how the coup could happen. No leadership contest, no anything like that. They just take over. What will happen in the next coming weeks? Well, I can't tell you, but I will tell you this now. Everything we've had from the Tory conference has been very clear. Truss's days are numbered, and that it is going to be impossible to turn this around. So we will be keeping a very close eye on what goes on here, but oh my, oh my indeed. And we'll be covering Truss's speech later on tonight on our Wednesday Night Live, so hey, tune in, we'll see you there. But she's got to give sort of a miracle speech to try and calm the Tory conference, because oh boy, is she in trouble when they get back into Parliament. Oh boy. But anyway, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.